welcome everybody again. Um, and thank you, Mr. Jackson, for your beautiful video. It's always good to be reminded about good practice techniques. And it was interesting you said about the warm up. I've been using the same warm up for decades. I mean, you just find one that works and you stick with it. So yeah, it was really, really great. So if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand or type it into the chat. And yeah, so anyone have any questions? Christopher? I will volunteer you.
Can you hear me?
Don't volunteer.
Hi,
Yeah.
hi, Christopher.
Hi. My question was, while listening to you, you said you was talking about long tones.
Yeah.
Um, what is the difference, like when a flute player does long tones and a trombone player do long tones? Like, what's the difference?
That's a great question, and I wish I knew absolutely anything about playing the flute. But my guess is that the answer in terms of what's important is what you're listening for while you're playing. Are you making the best sound that you are absolutely capable of making? And oftentimes for young players, we're not really sure what that is. So it's great. You've got your teachers to model after. If there's no one in the room with you, you have lots of your favorite recordings to listen to. And it's really important that rather than do what a lot of young musicians do, which is they pick up the instrument, they play, and then they react. They decide, what I just heard, did I like it? Did I not like it? But imagine if every single time you picked up your flute to play, if you heard in your mind the most beautiful flute sound that you could possibly imagine, and whether that sound is based on something you heard in a lesson or something that you heard in a recording, and that your goal when you take your breath to blow through the flute is to recreate that beautiful sound. If you do that every single time you hold the instrument, then the sound's just going to keep getting better and better. And your idea of what a great sound is also going to continue to grow. That's the same for any instrument.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Patricia?
Yeah, I had a question about the different types of columns of practicing, being warm up technique and musical literature.
Yeah.
Will there ever be a point? Is there any a point where the columns will like combine with each other? Like, will there be a time where when you're warming up and focusing on techniques, or focusing on techniques in musical literature, or vice versa?
Absolutely. It's so great for you to bring that up because, oftentimes it doesn't necessarily, when I talk about the technique in the literature, we don't necessarily need to separate those two things. And for example, what's your instrument?
Violin.
Violin. So for example, if I have a piece of music on the stand and I get to a particular passage and that passage may give me some particular trouble, whether it has to be with register, with range, with pitch, or with a particular type of articulation, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll put this piece of music on the stand and right next to it, I'll put whatever exercise or etude that most helps me with that aspect of my technique. And sometimes it's nice to kind of go back and forth between the two. So I think it's really, really important to kind of integrate the ideas. They're not two separate things. It takes great technique to make beautiful music. And the two are not something that's intended to be separated. So anytime you can bring those two together, I think it's really important. Even in terms of when you practice what, it doesn't necessarily need to be, okay, now I'm practicing my technique, now I'm practicing my literature. Going back and forth between the two tends to be a pretty healthy way to keep track of things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question.
If you don't mind, I'd like to add one thing to what you talked about at the end was time management for practicing, especially when you get to college.
Yeah.
As I told Mr. Jackson, I actually went to University of Michigan, and while I was in college, what I found was that if I did my practicing first thing in the morning before classes, and I know it sounds awful to get up that early, but I would usually practice from about 6:30 until 9 in the morning.
Yeah.
Now, the benefits of this, and the reason was because I know for myself that at night I'm useless. Like after the day is over, I'm brain dead. I'm not going to get any useful practicing done. But also, you get the best practice rooms.
Yes, you do. You do.
So I highly recommend at least trying morning practicing once you go to college.
I would say that the majority of college students are unaware that there's a world that exists before 10 a.m.
Yep.
Sometimes noon. And it's true, you know, this building and most buildings, when it comes to early morning times, is just wide open. Lots of empty rooms, lots of empty auditoriums and stages. But if people are willing to get up early, then you're definitely having an advantage.
Hi, Joseph. You're muted.
I completely forgot about the Primavera thing. I'm messed up with interlocking camp.
Oh no, you okay?
Yeah.
I'm glad you could join us, bud.
Yeah.
Joseph is one of our trombone players, one of two. What grade are you in now? You're going to 11th? Is that right?
Yeah. Yep, next year.
Joseph, good to see you.
Hey.
My hope is that Joseph will take a trip out to Michigan and maybe get a trial lesson or something from you.
Yeah.
You know,
Come on down. Happy to see you.
that's terrific.
As soon as it's safe.
Yeah, as soon as it's safe. We have another trombonist joining in any second. He's on his way to Peabody in the fall. He's been with us for a number of years. Hopefully, he'll get here like in the next couple of minutes or so.
Yeah, he already asked to be admitted. It says joining now, so
Oh, okay, good.
be here
Good.
momentarily.
So, Joseph, as the resident trombone player on the Zoom call, you got any trombone questions for Mr. Jackson?
I guess recently I've been having a little trouble with high notes, and I'm not sure if I'm like going to injure myself or not. Like it's a weird. I'm not really sure, but
Sure.
I had a little pain, and I took a couple days off, and I feel okay now. But just how do you like keep yourself safe, I guess?
Yeah, I think first of all, like when it comes to brass players and embouchures and your chops, I would say be really, really careful. If you're feeling any pain, then just stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing. And then the next thing is try to figure out what it is you're doing that's causing the pain. And just speaking in terms of just bare essentials, that we know when it comes to playing in the upper register, that we're talking about what regarding our wind, What's the most important aspect of wind? We're talking about the upper register. Speed.
Wait. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to use a really, really fast column of air when we're playing in the upper register. And what tends to happen is that when the air is too slow, the chops can tell, so they work harder, right? So definitely a ratio between like wind speed and how hard our chops are working, right? And if the wind's not fast enough, we work that much harder. We're more prone to injury, right? So wind speed is a really, really, really big part of it. And of course, I probably need to see your setup and your embouchure to help you further. But that's probably the most important thing you can think about when it comes to working in upper register. And you can go back and take a look at the practice video that I made. But one of the things that I talk about is coming at things from different directions, so that when you are working in the upper register, you're going to want to work on it in different ways. You're going to want to do some things in the upper register that require you to slur in and out of it, so that you've got some flexibility in and out of the upper register. You're going to want to do some things that require you to have a really clean and clear articulation in the upper register, and you might even start off with some things that just simply focus on making sure that your wind is fast enough in the upper register to make a really, really beautiful focused sound. And you can come at those things from different directions. Scales and arpeggios are great. You have a couple of upper register exercises, high range exercises.
Yeah, I've been using the the Norman Bolter exercises.
Good, that's good. Yeah, and you might sort of look around and find some others. And like I said before, you might try one thing one day, try something different the next day, and just kind of go back and forth. coming at it from different directions, but any time at all that you feel even the least bit of pain, it's a great idea to stop what you're doing. And I'm also a big fan of repurposing other exercises and etudes. So you've got your Rochu, your Bordoni etudes. The Bordoni etudes are great to play in different registers and different clefs. Have you been doing some of that too?
Not that much, but I actually somebody else said that I was in an interlocking Zoom and
Yeah,
they had I think Ken Thompson and he showed an example of that.
yeah, Ken Tompkins. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
sorry.
My buddy Ken, who lives about an hour away, we play together all the time, and he's absolutely right. So you can take those Bordoni etudes, you can put them into tenor clef. Great way to work on your tenor clef and your high range at the same time, and you're
Yeah.
still trying to use great air and make really beautiful phrases while at the same time working on your upper register.
It's funny you brought up Ken because I was going back and forth between David and Ken for this, and
Yeah,
I know David and Ken will be next. I'll get him next year sometime. But that's great.
and and Kenny's used to sitting next to the both of us as well.
That's right.
So, yeah, yeah, good to see you.
That's right, man. Yeah, that's a great question. So I have a question for you on behalf of the students, and I'm not sure if someone's asked this while I was on the phone or whatever. But for each one of the sections that you lay out in the video, um, do you do each one of those subcategories for each every day, or do you like break it up like per day? Like maybe for the warm ups, like you'll do buzzing and like lip slurs or whatever it is, and then move on to section B and kind of do the same thing, or is it literally like an take like all or nothing type
Yeah,
of thing?
yeah, well, definitely not all or nothing, and I wouldn't advise anyone to necessarily try to hit every single one of those things in one day. I think that probably wouldn't be able to focus enough time on any one of them to make a lot of improvement. So for me personally, my warm up doesn't vary a lot. It's just like I said, I kind of call the warm up the pre-flight check, right? And you get in the plane, you check all your gear, make sure everything's in working order, and then you go on and you do the day's work. And where that's concerned, you know, it's a really good idea. I tell students that first of all, you have to have some sense of what are some of the biggest things you need to work on. You know, and if you're not sure, then ask your teacher. They'll tell you very quickly. You may already know based on what you've heard in your lessons, and you're going to choose those things are going to be at the top of your list. So those things may be some of the things that you work on every day, but other aspects of your technique, I would say pick and choose. So what you do on a Monday or a Wednesday might be completely different than what you do on a Tuesday and Thursday, so that you're moving things around. You know, so oftentimes people are working out and say, okay, this is my upper body day, this is my lower body day, this is my cardio day. You know, and there's some of that can be similar in terms of practicing as well, to sort of mix things up a little bit. It keeps things interesting. It keeps you moving around so that you're improving on the things that need to be improved, and you're also maintaining the things that need to be maintained. You know, just because you're good at something, you can't not do it for 5 days and expect to be great at it at day 6. So it's important, in addition to doing the things that you're going to be doing to improve, that taking those other things that you're going to maintain and rotate those throughout the week. You might change it up. You might do a particular exercise on a Monday and a Wednesday and a Friday. You know, I think the most important thing about it is that you plan ahead, that when you walk into the practice room, you have a sense of what it is you're going to get done, and that you have a little bit more forethought in terms of how you're going to plan out your week. And I tend to think of things 1 week at a time. Maybe it's because I'm teaching each lesson 1 week at a time, and my students are learning each lesson 1 week at a time. But I think most of us deal with things in the course of a week. So you might plan out what you're going to do for that week, and it might completely change for the next week as well.
That's a great answer, yeah, I agree. And I think that would also apply. Patricia, who's a violinist, Christopher is a flute player. I mean, I think that sort of thinking should apply to all musicians. Like, you definitely want to change things up, you know, and thinking about maintaining things as well as improving on other aspects.
For me, and like I said in the video, for me, it's like if somebody calls it a routine, or if I think that it's got to be exactly the same way every day, it makes me not want to do it. So I have to vary things enough to keep it interesting. And other people are just the opposite. Other people is like, I'm going to do this. It's going to be this way every single day. Otherwise, I can't play the instrument. I find that to be a little bit limiting, and it's because you may not get that day where you have your hour and a half of exactly what you need before you have to sound great in front of someone else. I think it's important to be able to move things around and have it be very fluid.
Yeah, I find it's good to have a little, for me personally, to have like a 15 to 20 minute thing that I can just do every day. I can rely on it. It's like having a morning routine, right? Everyone has a certain morning routine, and if you don't get to do it, you feel a little weird, right? But then if you're going to expand it to have a real, work on etudes, work on, things like that, then, and of course you should be working on stuff that you're working on in the pieces, and, later on, not just solo repertoire, but also orchestral, stuff that you need to learn for the next week and all that stuff. So
for me, especially, if I want to finish, if I want to work on something specific, I would usually do that first. Or I would never really say that for last. For example, if I wanted to focus on etudes, I spend most of my time on etudes than I do on my scales or my solo pieces or orchestral pieces.
I just want to comment on one thing you said at the end of the video is leave time to play your favorite music, something that you're going to be good at. And I think that's extremely important, especially for kids, for students on any level, because I mean, I know for me, practicing a lot of times can be very demoralizing. And because I mean, generally you're practicing things that you're not good at, and it doesn't feel good a lot of the time. So if at the end of the practice session can leave on a positive note, like playing something that you feel strong on. I mean, that will go a long way into helping you fall into that, depression that that can set in. I thought that was brilliant advice, and I fully support it. It's great.
I was gonna say that what Kenny said, but also as someone who never made it out of being a student in my instrument. I for sure had practice times that was not practice, it was really just playing. And I think if I had the advice to save what you like to play for as a separate thing, I probably would have spent more time actually practicing. And I don't know, I did think that was also really beautiful. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person too, right? So if it's your reward, maybe at the end of a practice session, that's great. If you get in the middle of a practice session and you're stuck, you get stuck in your head or you get stuck in your body, sometimes just sort of letting all that go in the middle of a practice session and just playing something that you love can actually bring you back home, so that you pick up the instrument and whatever it is you're focusing on becomes just a little bit easier. And the reason for that is that anytime we take any aspect of our playing and we separate it from music making, it becomes kind of a chore, kind of a mental chore, So we always want to do whatever we can to sort of connect the two, so that we remember why am I practicing my articulation? Why am I practicing my range? So that I can play beautiful Brahms, so that my Beethoven 5 sounds excellent every single time I pick up the instrument, right?
Great point. That's something that I kind of have to force in the forefront of my mind when I'm doing those exercises like this. There's a reason why. There's a reason why.
Exactly.
That's great.
and also make time to play with other people just for fun.
Yeah.
I would add to that, especially, I don't know how much wind and brass players do it, but for string players, string quartets, piano trios, just get together and play for fun. Don't worry about it being perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Duets are a great thing.
Yep.
That's some of my best times in a practice room were playing duets with someone else. There's all kinds of fun things you can do with that too.
I think that's what we're missing the most right now. It's just playing with other people.
Absolutely.
Yep, that is actually true.
I've had some fun with some of these projects, and they've been really great. And suddenly, we're playing with people that live across the country that we've only heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
It's been fun, but yeah, it'll be nice to play with people again.
Absolutely, I look forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Christian, I see you down there. Christian Kersey is our senior trombone player who's headed to Peabody probably next month. Am I right, Christian? You go in August?
Yeah, moving days on August 21st.
Oh man, it's coming close.
Wow.
Um, do you have any questions for Mr. Jackson? I know you probably didn't get to finish the video, but you and Joseph should both make sure you go and finish this one scene of it after we're done this Q&A. But is there, Christian, you have any general trombone questions for David?
Um,
You must have something.
Yeah, he knows it all.
I got some stuff to talk to you about anyway, Christian, whether you got questions or not. So you're off to your freshman year, right, Christian?
yeah,
Congratulations. Are you excited?
yeah.
Yeah, good, good. It's an exciting point in life, and what I find is interesting for most freshmen is probably one of the best skills that you can try to develop your freshman year is time management. And it's be the first time in your life that no one's going to help you with it at all. No one's going to tell you when to wake up. No one's going to tell you when to eat, when to go to bed, how long to study, how long to practice. It's going to be completely up to you. So if just knowing that going into your freshman year can be really, really helpful. And I talked about this a little bit in the video, which you can go back and watch. And I talked about what oftentimes happens for like a college freshman, because you're suddenly in a university setting. And every teacher that you have, whether it's your history teacher, your English teacher, your trombone teacher, your orchestra conductor, they are positive that they are the reason that you are there, right? And they assign their work accordingly. And they're all absolutely right. That's the tough part, right? So what you have to figure out how to do is manage your time really well. And in regards to what this masterclass is all about, in terms of practicing, things that I see sometimes is that you, as a freshman, will get your freshman schedule, and you'll have everything blocked out in terms of this is what time your music history class is, this is what time your theory class is. You've got your orchestra rehearsal this time, you've got your lesson on Tuesdays, or whatever the case is. And they look at that schedule, and when it comes to practicing, they'll think of their practicing as something that just basically fills in the cracks of that schedule. And so it's not really as etched in stone as those classes are. So even though, you know, no one's going to tell you this, and it's not going to appear on your schedule, you've got to put it there. You've got to put it there just as you would your theory class, your orchestra class, your history class. Schedule your practice and make sure that you are really selfish about that time, and learn how to manage that time. And the other thing I'll say is just make sure that you walk into your freshman year knowing that you're going to have to keep a calendar. Like you've never kept a calendar in your life, you've got to learn how to keep a calendar.
Okay.
So I answered your question, right?
Well, yeah.
That's what I tell all my freshmen.
Yeah, the time management, that's a big thing, especially when you're making the transition from high school to freshman year. I mean, he's totally right. You do not have anyone like, you know, waking you up or telling you when to do anything. I mean, you could easily just not go to classes if you so decided. Don't do that.
If you do, something is wrong.
Yeah, do not do that. That's the absolute wrong thing. But, you know, a lot of it is going to be, most of it, all of it will be self-initiated. Like, you'll have to have a lot of, you know, go and get them. That whole secret.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's valuable advice.
Mm-hmm. And for the rest of your life. Scheduling practice time as a professional was harder for me than as a student. Because you're already playing so much and you need to really, you know, just manage it and like on a weekly basis, not a daily basis. You know? So if one day you have a few hours and then the next day you only have half an hour, that's what you have, but you have to actually use that time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Good. Fred just joined us.
Fred?
Fred is Christian's younger brother. Fred is a trumpet player. a talented trumpet player who is. Are you going into 8th grade, Fred? I think it's 8th grade. He's going into. I don't know why I can't hear him. If you have
Fred, are you there?
any questions, Fred, you can type them into the chat, or you can just start talking. Um, Christopher, we haven't heard from you, have we?
Yeah, we did. We heard a question,
Okay.
but you're welcome to ask another question.
Oh, I had another question. Well, I was thinking about that I always see a trombone player who has long arms, and I never see a trombone player that has like short arms. Why is that?
Well, there are probably plenty of trombone players with short arms. I know lots of trombone players with short arms. And as long as the arm is long enough to reach 7th position, it's all good. Yeah, yeah. Don't have to have.
But there are extensions, right?
What's that?
Aren't there you can put onto the slide, right?
Yeah, I've seen some of those things, but I think most people don't necessarily need them. But I think that there are some things that are coming out, and I just saw an article recently about one, and I'm trying to remember her name. That just put out an article about something that's very useful for people that do have short arms. Yeah, so there are some tools available for people that really do need them.
Christopher's a bit of an entrepreneur, so he's just getting some ideas.
I'll think of her name in a minute, but I think there somebody may have already beat you to it.
Oh, that's great. Oh yeah, Patricia says that reminds me of some string players having bigger hands than others.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that is a thing. One thing that reminds me of this viola players is there's so many there's so much variety with the size of the violas that are out there. You got ones that are like small like violins and the huge ones, that are for the big hands and whatnot. So unfortunately, trombone or brass doesn't really work that
Yeah,
way.
that really doesn't.
Yeah, I mean there are tiny trombones out there, but they're not for the faint of heart.
The more
That's
I think about it, the more I see that strings are like probably the most versatile instruments because they might be hard to like learn, but they can do some things that other wind families like wind and brass can't.
Those are them's fighting words. That's another master class.
not
Yeah, but
not
I'm
to be
so
like prejudiced
thankful.
against any other like like any other instrument family, but
I have always been thankful that I only have to learn how to play one instrument, though. Yeah. And no transposing.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. I mean, I would say in your defense of what you just said, it's very in some ways it's very true. And for any trombonist to for example try to transcribe a violin piece, you probably got a lot of work in front of you.
Mm-hmm. I would say.
unless you know piano, then you can probably learn two string instruments at once or three, depending, like violin, cello, and bass.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, as a brass player, one thing that's frustrated me when it comes to string repertoire, Bach in particular, in the unaccompanied Bach, is you have to stop and breathe as a brass player and to break up that phrase. So it's much harder to, find those points. And sometimes it goes on for a while before you can actually take a sensible breath. But string players, there is breathing. It's not so tied to the actual music and the phrasing. Breathing on a brass instrument will easily break up a phrase and destroy it if it's not done properly. But so that's something that we have to think about. That I'm always jealous about you guys.
I'm always jealous of like wind and brass players because I'm surprised they can just do all these types of things just with their breath. It's kind of impressive, to be honest.
Yeah, and if as string players, this is why we should, wind and brass players should go to string master classes. String players should go to wind and brass master classes. We should all go to singing master classes.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I started playing a lot of opera was really actually when I started thinking about my phrasing in a totally different way because of the breath. because we can just play and play and play, right? So it's not something that we think of in the same way, but we should for phrasing purposes.
Absolutely, yeah. And great comment about singing, because ultimately, what do we all want to do through our instruments? We want to be able to sing to the instrument. We want to have a singing quality through our instrument, no matter what instrument that is. So absolutely. And like I said in the video for trombone players, that's important because a lot of trombone players sort of get stuck listening to all of their favorite trombone players. And that's fantastic. Absolutely do that. But broaden your repertoire, broaden your audio collection to include non-trombones, to include great string players, great singers, and other types of music.
I think that is invaluable advice right there.
Yeah.
Totally, 100%. 100%. Fred, are you there yet? You got any questions for us? No, I'm not seeing any movement. All right. Anyone else got any questions? Will we figure out if Fred can do it or not? Christopher?
My question was, how do you keep your airstream consistent? Because I know it was like one time, like a few years ago, I tried out an instrument, which was the trumpet, and I had to buzz my lips, and it was really hard. So how do you do that?
That's a great question. That's a really, really good question. And of course, for us as wind players, flute, trombone, it's probably the most important question you can think about. So it's how to keep the air moving, right? And for depending on the instrument, sometimes we're talking about what type of air we're using. People sometimes just throw at this idea of the students use more air, when oftentimes you need to be a lot more specific. So what does that mean for the flute? What does that mean for the trumpet? What does that mean for a low brass instrument? For a low brass instrument, we talk a little bit more about volume of wind, and sometimes in regards to register to wind speed. I don't know anything about the flute, and I would assume that some of those things are true about the flute as well. But one of the things that I tell people, especially when it comes to making beautiful music and matching that up with wind, is that when you take that breath, you always want to think about blowing your wind into the shape of the phrase that you want to make. So you're never just thinking about the wind in terms of the initial beginning of the sound, which a lot of people do, but you're really thinking about the wind as moving all the way through any given note into the next note and all the way across the phrase. And sometimes if we simply attach our wind to our musical idea of the way we want to shape the phrase, then we don't have to think about wind so much. It does automatically what it needs to do because it has the right goal in mind. So really taking a breath and thinking about blowing that wind in the shape of the phrase is as simple as anything that we need to think about to keep it moving. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
That's probably true for the flute too.
Yeah, that's a great question. I always think that the flute is much harder than any brass, though. I think I said this to you before because brass, all the brass, we have some resistance, something pushing against the wind that we're putting into the instrument. Flute doesn't have that.
Yeah.
Like, I would run out of air in 2 seconds if I played the flute. I don't know how you guys do it. It's very impressive, especially when you spin out those long phrases. If there's no more questions, I think we should wrap it up. Thank you to all the students for coming, and David, a special thank you to you for making the video and for this Q&A. It's been very informative, and for the students, it's been great.
It's a pleasure. Absolutely, anytime.
Awesome. If there's no more questions, I think that's it. Thanks, guys. It's great to see you. And yep, feel free to reach out if you have any questions.